Hey, everybody. This is Sandra Beck, and I'm so excited today because I am here with CEO Mark Steffe. You know me, I always like to go to the top. And he is with a company called First Command. And you guys know I'm a single mom for 16 years. I have two children I'm sole supporting. I also took in my veteran dad 10 years ago, which kind of makes us have a little merry-go-round financially every month. And I really believe that many of you need to have a good financial education, because if you fall down on the job, if money falls down on the job, you cannot provide for your kids. You're racked with guilt. You have all these different feelings and emotions around money. And that's why I brought Mark on. And I had an epiphany, Mark, after our last show, that when we were talking about the importance of savings, the importance of having financial literacy, of having, your money work for you, I thought about it. And, when I was first a single mom and I had this crazy overhead that I couldn't pay, and I staved off foreclosure, like, with a sword and a gun, with the wolves at my door. And I took every job I had to take because I needed the money, even if it didn't make financial sense. If somebody wanted me to type up documents with an MBA, I stayed up all night typing up legal documents, because without any savings, I didn't have power to say no. And that was really an aha moment after our last show. And for those of you who want to look it up, go ahead and look back. A couple of months ago, 3 months ago, we did an interview with Mark Steffe. So please look that up. I'll link it in the show notes below. But when you don't have savings, when you don't have financial certainty, you have to grab, especially as a single mom, every job that comes along, every side hustle, every this, no matter how people treated me. And in those days, Mark, I was treated really poorly, but I sucked it up because I needed that money. And with no savings and no financial plan, I didn't have the power to say no. And the worse I was treated in these crappy jobs and talked down to and yelled at by people who had no business talking to any human being that way, I didn't know any better. I couldn't do any better. But then I became educated in finances. And that's why I brought you on today, because your company does a really good job educating people. So if you're a single mom out there, if you're a married mom, if you're a mom who's been on deployment and coming back, I need you to check out First Command, because education is everything. And even if you have $5 or $10 to start with, it's amazing what it can mean 10 years later. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me back. It's great to be here. And I couldn't agree with you more about everything you just said to open the show. And that education piece is so critical. And in the process that we utilize with our clients, it's one of the things I think it's one of the things I'm proudest of, is that it's not just getting people through the process, but it's the education that comes along with that process. So our advisors do an excellent job of not only, helping people understand what they need to do, but there's a big why component that comes along with it. And it's like anything else. If you're an informed, knowledgeable consumer, you make better decisions. And we've got a long track record of clients. Once they start with us, they tend to stay with us for an extended period of time. And I think it has everything to do with not only doing the right thing and getting them in the right products or services for their particular situation, but it has a lot to do with the education along the way. Because again, if you know not only the what, but the why, it goes a long way.
Right. And just the why of going, if you have savings, if you have financial plans in place, you have the power to say no to a job that doesn't serve you or your family. If you're spending too much time away from your kids and your kids are struggling and you're struggling, but you're doing it because you're a slave to the paycheck. One of the things that I found in talking about financial planning, I always thought it was just for wealthy people. I just thought it was for, celebrities and people who had millions of dollars. It never occurred to me, Mark, that it would work for somebody with a humble income. Like I had two kids and my dad's veteran, the money that he gets from his retirement.
Yeah, it's I think that's the connotation, right? When you say financial planning, there's this immediate assumption, well, that's only for rich people, or and even if it's not for rich people, I'm sure it's not available to me at my level. And even if it was, I doubt that I could afford it. And that's the dynamic we've really worked hard to change at First Command. And it's not just financial planning isn't just a high-end service available to the wealthy. We've taken this high-end service and made it available to military families at no cost for the planning piece of our process. So just to understand that process a little bit, it typically starts with meeting with a financial advisor and really explaining to that advisor what's important to you and your goals and dreams and aspirations, and where are you starting? What's the starting point? Where are you starting from, right? And what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And then the advisor will take that information, build the financial plan, and then there'll be a second meeting where that financial plan is actually delivered back to the military family. And all that work, all that consultation, there is literally no cost and no obligation to our active duty military families. So once the plan is developed and delivered to the family could say, boy, we're just not ready to do anything yet. And they could walk away, no cost, no obligation. They could take those recommendations and implement them somewhere else. Not the path we'd like to recommend, but it could happen. Or they could say, hey, this makes sense to us, and we would like to begin by implementing some or all of the recommendations found in this financial plan. And it's at the implementation of those recommendations. That's when the appropriate fees or commissions would be charged.
Mark, I'm just going to stop you for a second right here, because now is a really good time to thank our sponsor. And our sponsor today is Best Fiends. And it's a super fun game, and I've been playing it for over a year now. They have sponsored Military Mom Talk Radio for over a year. So we want to thank them for that, because without sponsors like this, shows like this wouldn't happen. And, one of the things, Mark, that I was thinking about as I prepared for today's show was how frustrated I get. To get to my office, there was traffic today, then there was long lines, then I thought, okay, I'm just going to stop in the store really quick and pick up some things, and they were like out of smooth peanut butter, they only had chunky, and all this stuff starts adding up. And I was driving with my kids this morning, and they were arguing so much that I missed my exit, and those things, I had to overshoot it, turn it around. And whenever I need to blow off steam, I love playing Best Fiends, because it's this top-rated mobile puzzle adventure game, and it gives me hours of fun, casual gameplay, and it never gets old. The music is good. It's got thousands of levels, and what I like about it is it helps me unwind. It helps me de-stress. I go into these little magical worlds, and I beat a level and I feel some accomplishment, and sometimes I don't get any accomplishment in my day because there's so many things going on. And just to have the little, phone game go, woo, yay, you did a good job, helps me feel better about my day. It just gives me a brain break. And I've cleared over 300 levels so far. So I've been using this for a while. And with Best Fiends, there's always something new. And today, tomorrow, every day after that, and there's thousands of level of play. There's tons of cute characters. I mean, these guys are so cute, and you can evolve them and feel some sense of accomplishment, and you just never get bored. And the puzzles they're challenging enough that, you have to make some effort, but they're not so hard that they're frustrating. And with Best Fiends, the fun never ends. And don't blame me if you become slightly obsessed. So I want you guys to download Best Fiends free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's Friends without the R, Best Fiends. Best Fiends free today. Go to the Apple App Store or Google Play. Friends without the R. You'll be glad you did. You can also play with your own friends and send them gifts and send them little things. With the push of a button, they'll know you're thinking of them. And no matter where they are, my friends and family are in the US and Canada. They're all scattered all over. I can send them a little gift. I can send them a life. I can send them, some things that makes me feel connected, even though I'm just playing a little digital game. You'd be surprised how fun it is. So download Best Fiends free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's Friends without the R, Best Fiends. Now, Mark, you were talking a little bit about how this financial service that you guys offer to military families is no charge, to the person until they end up, using or buying some of these services. And that always wasn't the case.
We historically, years ago, charged or had the ability to charge active duty members for that financial plan, that recommendation. And we took that away years ago because we saw it as a barrier to entry. It was a reason for a military family to not get started on a path to financial security. And we wanted to remove that barrier to entry, we wanted to take that away so that people could at least get a free look as to what this stuff is all about, understand it is available to them, and not let cost be a reason not to get started. And I think we might have said this on the last call. No one got in the military to be rich, but it doesn't mean they should have to be poor either. And maybe you think, well, geez, what if I only have $50 a month to put into a plan, or maybe $100 a month to put in a plan? What difference could that possibly make? Do it every month for years and watch that grow, and you would be surprised how much that really turns into. And as you get further along in your career, you get into a second career after the military, that $100 might become, $150 with a promotion, and $200 at the next promotion. And so it grows incrementally in terms of the contribution you're able to make. But then as that money, compounds over time, you would be surprised what a little humble start, years ago could accumulate to 10, 20, 30 years later.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that always frightened me about meeting with a financial planner is they were going to tell me like I couldn't spend the way I was spending. And, that was a big thing going, oh, I don't want anybody controlling me. I don't want anybody telling me what to do, or I'm embarrassed how much I spend on shoes and handbags because I'm a girl and that's what it is. But I came across this thing, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it about, like an honest budget. And it was something that I came across with on another show. And I started doing some digging for today's show because I wanted to know the difference between what I should be spending and what I'm actually spending. And I heard the term honest budget. And when I looked at my honest budget, which was based on what I really was spending, Mark, my perception of how much I was spending was way off, because as a single mom, I very rarely treat myself to anything. So like over
Right.
Christmas, I bought a really nice handbag. Well, it was $110. Like I know handbags can go up to thousands of dollars, but for me and my lifestyle and my budget, to spend $100 on a handbag when I didn't really need it seemed excessive. So when I sat down and looked at my honest budget, meaning pulled out my credit cards, pulled out my bank statements, and really looked at what I was spending, I realized I'm not a frivolous person. But I had that perception mostly because my dads and my brothers are like, you need another purse, kind of thing.
Right.
But I think working with a financial planner or starting to have some financial literacy, you might be surprised. And you might be surprised at how much you could put away with no trouble.
People are always surprised. And I'm going to tell you a little quick story. In a prior life, prior career, one of the things I would do is work with financial salespeople, and they would go into offices and present to advisors and try to help them grow and build their businesses. And they would often do advisor seminars or client seminars, and amongst other things for their business. And one of the things I would do is I would just videotape them giving a part of their presentation, and we would sit down together and watch that videotape. Normally, I didn't have to say anything. The person would watch the video and say, oh my gosh, I tend to do really well on this, but holy cow, I didn't know that I was doing this really poorly, right? And it just becomes obvious because you can see it in front of you. And I didn't have to tell that person, go fix this. They would look at me and say, I need to go fix this, right? And it became very clear. I think sitting down with a financial, professional and going through your budget is kind of like that videotape I was talking about. Once you've put it in writing and once you've laid it out in front of you, I, as a financial advisor, don't have to look at you and say, do you think $500 on Starbucks every month is a good idea? Or, you're going to see this. And so, holy cow, I don't spend as much as I thought on these things, but I'm spending way more than I thought on these things and more than I need to on these things. And it doesn't mean, again, I, as the advisor, have to tell you, stop spending it. Just going through that process and having an expert there with you to help you, ask questions, get things laid out. And then you look at it and some of this starts to become really obvious. And then you find, well, I didn't think I had any money that I could save.
Right.
Well, then you find $50, $75, $100. Like, boy, I never knew that I had this money available if I just changed my spending habits a little bit. And then, as I said before, that $100 over time, every month, can become a significant amount of money.
Absolutely. And, for ladies out there, I'm going to make an analogy to this. It's like weight loss. When I started my cancer treatments 14 months ago, the first thing they had me do was sit down with a nutritionist. And I'm like, I don't eat that much sugar. Like, I don't eat that many, sugar grams a day. And when I found that my creamer that I put in my coffee in the morning was 130, 150 calories, well, that's a whole workout. And she said, why don't you just switch from this heavy creamer to this light creamer or coconut creamer? All of a sudden, I gained another 130 calories that I wasn't consuming a day. And it was because I went to an expert and had an expert look at things. And, maybe your expert says, you can still get your Starbucks coffee every day, but maybe when you bring it to your office, add your own creamer or add your own hazelnut, and you can still have the same everything, but you don't have to spend $5 or $6, or for me 160 calories to get something that's still satisfying. My life is still good. You can make these little micro changes and do it with money. You can do it with time. You can do it with calories, or protein grams or sugar grams, whatever your thing is, but the philosophy is the same.
I agree with you. I would tell you through this coaching that we were doing in the past, oftentimes it's not a massive change that's required to make a big difference. Often it's an incremental change here, an incremental change there, and a little one over here, and those two or three little tweaks add up to make a big difference. And I think maybe to your point, Sandra, that's one of the fears, is that people coming in saying, I'm not going to understand this. It's going to require all this massive change in my life. I don't really
Yep.
have the time. And then you come in and you lay it all out and you say, I can do this, right? And
Right.
that becomes empowering. And I think as you think through COVID and all that we've been through these last 11 months or so, and feeling almost we're reacting to everything, right? And the world is dictating where we can go and where we can and what we can and can't do, and it's very reactive. And most of us don't like being in a reactive mode. We would much prefer to be in a proactive mode where we feel like we've got some empowerment and maybe a little bit of control over our lives. And that's one of the things I love about this financial planning process and the client engagement process at First Command. It empowers our clients to take control of their finances, to really get themselves working with a financial coach on a path to financial security and make the decisions that will help keep them on a path to financial security. And then as we talked about earlier, the fact that you now are learning along the way. So you not only have empowered yourself from your finances, you've empowered yourself to make better financial decisions along the way. And we've all got enough stuff to worry about. And if this can help take that worry or that emotion down a notch, or maybe even
Yep.
remove it altogether, there's huge value in that as well. We've all got a million things we're dealing with every day. This would be one less thing you have to worry about. And like I said, I think there's huge value in that as well.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really struck me after last show, and I hear it again in this show, is that when I thought about meeting with a financial planner, I was like, oh, he's going to tell me I spend too much. I'm not going to be able to do the things I want. He's going to figure out like my dirty little financial secrets. And then of course, now I get myself whipped into a snit and I don't want to go. But the difference is when you meet with a financial planner, first of all, it's very gentle, it's very kind, and it's more about an exploration. And when you talked about kind of an awareness, and it was more for me like a mindfulness. Like when I realized, when I looked at these papers together with the financial planner, and he said, oh, you're not spending as much as you think on this. I'm like, oh, good for me, gold star. But then he's like, you're spending a lot on this, and you might want to just think about that. He didn't tell me what to do. Like, you're not telling us what to do. You're just letting us know, because some of my mindfulness was to be aware of how much fast food I was spending. And what I noticed with all that, Mark, it was always the same thing. It was after kids soccer, kids baseball, kids basketball, they're ravenous. And then they're in a bad mood because they're tired. They just played 2 or 3 hours of sports. We've been in the car. So the whining led me to drive through a drive-through and buy this food that isn't good for them, money I didn't want to spend, but I felt pressured into it. So I had a little aha just from the financial planner meeting, going, you know what? I am going to pack a bag and I'm going to put bananas, fruits, sandwiches, things like that. I'm going to be proactive, throw it in the back of my van. It's a van. We could put, a large family of 10 in the back of my van. And, I definitely have the room for it. And I definitely had old lunch boxes. And, the kids complained a little bit in the beginning, but you know what? When kids are hungry, they will eat anything in front of them, especially teenage boys. So I
That's
would
true.
just throw a pack at them, and I was spending $2 or $3 rather than $23 because my
Yep.
6'5", 15-year-old, he can down $30 worth of fast food and then be hungry an hour later. So it was the mindfulness that I gained from the session of going, okay, what do I want to change? What could I change? What makes sense for me?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And speaking from a family that has 4 teenage boys in it now and 1 teenage daughter, I get that example.
It's your whole
It's
paycheck right there.
oh my gosh. But I think what you're hitting on here is too often we get into a routine and we think about things a certain way. And what we lose sight of is the fact that there are options available to you.
Right.
But you don't know what those options are until you get real mindful and thoughtful about them. And I think a lot of times when you're living on a military income, you think I don't have options. I'm just kind
Right.
of going to react to this, or this is as good as it's going to get. And then you sit down with somebody that opens your eyes to a different way and different options. And suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I do have more control over this. I do, I can get this feeling of empowerment. And I think particularly important, or something that might also resonate with your audience, is that 80% of our advisors are former military or military spouses. So they've been there. They
Right.
know the challenges of a military lifestyle. They know about PCSs and what happens to the spouse during a PCS and careers and the challenges there and childcare and not knowing anybody in a new location, and then the service members off on deployment, and then I've got all these benefits and I can't figure out what they are or how to take advantage of them. So our company and our advisors know that intimately because many of them have lived it themselves. And here's what else I think will really be important when you think, as a potential client, I don't know this stuff and I'm not a financial expert. Well, guess what? Neither were 80% or more of our financial advisors. They were former military or military spouses who I would venture to guess that 95% of them never thought they would be a financial advisor. They were
Right.
getting to the end of their career, either through retirement or separation, and thought, how can I stay connected to the military? How can I continue to pay it forward? How can I continue to work with this group of people that I love dearly and want to provide some valuable service for? And they found First Command. And so they weren't financial experts, but we taught them everything they needed to know about being a successful advisor. All we asked them to come in with was a good work ethic and a passion for serving the military, and we'll teach them everything else. So if our advisors can get to the point of being financial experts, we can certainly help our clients come up that curve as well, because most of our advisors started in the same knowledge place that our clients started out, and that was not being an expert and being very unfamiliar with finances.
Well, right. And that's normal. Like I look at my
Right.
dad, he was born from a German family and, they had no money when they came here. So he joined the military to get his military education. It wasn't like, we had generations of wealth, to educate us as kids. We were hand-me-downs and running around like, every other kid in the country whose family joins the military.
Right.
And it's a normal situation, but it shouldn't be. That's why we're doing these radio shows and, promoting companies like First Command, because it's not enough just to say, oh, save money. Like, duh, everybody knows to save money, and when people would say that to me, Mark, they'd be like, oh, you need an emergency fund. And I'm like, really? As a single mom, I never thought of that. Like if the water heater breaks or, my kid breaks his arm, when my kids were little, I wouldn't let them play certain sports because I could not afford the $5,000 deductible for my family. So, you make these decisions and people go, oh yeah, just do this, just do that. And you're like, yeah, but when somebody sits down and goes, okay, here's what you can do. Like, because I think when you don't have money or you're not comfortable with money or money is even a tough conversation to have, you immediately put up the blocks, you put up the defenses, you put up the, well, nobody's going to tell me what to do. I don't have any money anyway. And what does it matter? I only have one income, all this defeating thinking. And then you talk to your peer group, which to me was all military families, like, yeah, we don't have any money either. And we
Right.
accepted that as a status quo. But that's not right. We can, as a group, together, we can do better, we can grow, we can have some of these things that financially sophisticated families have.
That's right. We often say at First Command that as a military family, you might not be able to get everything you want, but you can probably get anything you want. And there's an analogy I've been using for years at First Command, and we just now call it throw strikes, and everybody kind of gets it. But the analogy is this: my oldest son, who's 19, almost 19 now, when he was playing Little League, was a pitcher, and he was. I'm biased because he's my son, but he was a pretty good pitcher. And inevitably, at some point during a game, because he was young, especially, there'd be a point where he couldn't throw a strike. He couldn't find, the strike zone if his life depended on it. And inevitably, and for any parent whose kid plays Little League, you'll know what I'm talking about. Inevitably, there would be a dad or a mom somewhere in the stands that would yell, "Hey, Jack, throw strikes." And I told him at one point, "Jack, I will give you $100 if the first time you hear that, you tuck your glove under your arm, look up into the stands and say, 'No kidding.'" Right?
Right.
Jack's not throwing strikes because he doesn't get the object of the game or doesn't want to strike this kid out. Something's wrong with his mechanics. He's not
Right.
he's not throwing the ball the right way. And instead of the coach sitting just outside the dugout on a bucket of balls saying, "Hey, Jack, throw strikes," call timeout, get off your rear, walk out to the mound, and adjust my kid's mechanics and show him how to start throwing strikes again.
Exactly.
Don't just tell him to throw strikes. He knows what he's supposed to do. If he knew how to fix it, he'd have already fixed it. But he needs a coach to sit down with him, change his stand, change his throwing motion, whatever it is, slightly, right? We talked about this earlier. Don't make him a left-handed pitcher on the mound while he's a right-handed pitcher. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a little tweak to his throwing form to get him back to throwing strikes. And so telling somebody to get a savings account or emergency fund account doesn't fix the problem. Show me how I can get that and I'll do it. But if I knew how to do it on my own, I would have done it already.
That's right. That's right. And and I think a lot of times, like I saw that you have this thing called a TSP. And when I saw it first on the paper, I'm like, "Oh, that sounds awful." Like, and then it says got the word thrift in it. And I'm like, "Am I thrifty? I don't know if I'm thrifty."
Yeah.
And nobody likes to feel dumb. I don't like to feel dumb. Mark, you don't like to feel dumb, but there is a little bit of that going into something like this that you just have to kind of get over yourself and go, okay, if I was moving to Germany, I'm going to PCS to Germany, I wouldn't feel dumb trying to learn the language. Well, maybe I would, but like you would just do these things because you knew
Yep.
you needed to do them. So
Yep.
I want to let everybody know that when you meet with your first financial advisor, you might have some of these feelings. You're going to feel dumb. You're not going to know what the words mean. And, they're like, 5% of the blah, 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 blah. And that's kind of all I hear, like a Snoopy cartoon.
Yep.
And, you were talking about this with your pitching analogy, because maybe what your son didn't need was some micro adjustments in his pitching, but maybe he just needed his coach to calm him down.
Right.
Get your head back in the game. So take some breaths with me. And, this is going to be fine. Change is scary. It always is, but you just navigate it and keep going. That same coaching advice that I would have given for your son, depending on, obviously what he was like throwing wild pitches or, whatever
Right.
he's doing. But when you go to meet with your financial advisor, just accept that you're going to be nervous. Just accept that you're going to be uncomfortable. This is status quo, but it's not going to last forever. You just push through it and march on in. And what I love, what I'm hearing is there's no cost. So there's no risk. go call up First Command, meet with some people. I don't get paid for telling you to go to First Command. I think everybody should, because I think everybody should be educated. And you know what? If your spouse doesn't want to go with you, go yourself. Like, hello, nobody's going to get divorced over meeting with a financial planner that costs no money, that there's no obligation to buy or do anything. This is just education. So, I wanted people to emotionally get the drill, Mark, because it's emotions that keep us from doing it.
That's right. That is exactly right. And it's, some people don't like change, and I get that. But with anything new at all you try, whether you want to start learning how to cook and you've never been a good cook, if you want to learn how to ski and you've never been a skier, this is no different. You're going to start from a place of little to no knowledge, little to no skill. But if you really want to learn to cook, you really want to learn to ski, you really want to take control of your finances, you got to start somewhere. And the sooner you get started, the better it is. I mean, it's that old analogy, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is right now, right? Because you can't fix the past, but you can have a lot of influence and control over the future. So just know that you're going to come in, but you're going to come up the curve, and you may not know a lot, but you're going to come up that curve quickly. As I said before, that's where most of our advisors started. They weren't financial experts, and they learned it over time and through training. And that's the kind of knowledge we want to pass on to our clients. So they, as we said before, they don't know just what we want them to do or what they need to do to get to a better place financially. They understand why they're doing it as well. And that's a powerful combination.
Right. And they're not flying down the hill blind. Like,
Right.
we're not strapping on a pair of skis and going, good luck, see you at the bottom.
Exactly.
You're being handheld every step of the way. And, I know that your advisors are not going to push people any faster than they're comfortable with. Everybody will get there at their own rate. So if you go meet and you bring this stuff home and you chew on it and you think about it, this isn't a pressure game.
That's correct.
This is people helping people. And
Yes.
so let's talk about, these TSP contributions. What does that really mean?
So the thrift savings plan, let me try to equate it to something that people might be more familiar with. And I think back to especially my parents and their generation. Most companies started out with the pension plan, right? You would go somewhere, you would work most of your life there, you would retire from there, and then you would collect a pension of a certain amount a month for the rest of your life or the rest of your years in your spouse's life. And then that became a very costly proposition, right? And you look at a lot of companies now like General Motors, and you hear a lot about how big that pension plan liability is. And we often call it, General Motors is a pension plan with a car company attached to it, as opposed to the other way around. So that became a very expensive proposition for companies to continue to offer these generous pension plans. So what did they do? They created 401k plans, and then it became the responsibility of the employee to save enough money for their retirement. So what they did is they transferred the cost to the employee, and they transferred the risk to the employee. Because if I'm providing a pension plan, I have to fund it, and I take on the risk of that pension plan. Through a 401k that most of us are familiar with in the private sector, they transferred the cost and the risk to the employees. And now you have to put enough away to save for your retirement. Now, most companies provide a certain amount of matching dollars. So if you contribute a certain amount, they'll contribute as well. So you can get money from the company, but really it's up to you to save for you and think about your own retirement. Now let's translate that concept into the military. What did the military have forever? The military had the pension plan. Now, if you worked the whole 20 years in the military or more and retired, you got the pension plan. If you left before 20 years, you got nothing, right? Well, now with the thrift savings plan, what you have is the ability to put money away like a 401k. So why did the government reduce the pension plan and increase its focus on the thrift savings plan? The same reason companies did it. They can remove the expense and transfer it over to the service member. They can move the risk, some of that risk, over to the service member. So they didn't eliminate the pension plan. They reduced it by 20% and then made the thrift savings plan, which had been around for years, but they made the thrift savings plan more attractive. And one of the ways they made the thrift savings plan more attractive is that for military members, they used to not have a matching contribution, and they do now. So as a service member, if you put at least 5% of your pay into the thrift savings plan, the government will match that with an additional 5%. So
Nice.
one of the things we talk to all of our military families about is make sure you do everything you can to maximize your contributions to the thrift savings plan, to put in at least 5%. If you put in less than 5%, they're not going to give you a full 5%. They're going to match your contribution up to 5%. So if you put in 3, they'll put in 3. You put in 5, they'll put in 5. You put in 6, they still put in 5. But if you don't maximize the 5%, you're literally leaving free money on the table. The government is saying, I will give you 5% more if you put your 5% in. And if you don't put the full 5 in, you're leaving literally free money on the table. And that's one of the first things we always coach our clients to do is do everything you can to get that full 5% in there so you get every bit of the government contribution that they're willing to give you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, you guys, First Command has offices located near most of the major military installations. Their advisors are available to meet safely in person or remotely, so you can do this online. And the best way to get started is to go to their website, www.firstcommand.com, and they will connect you with a local advisor so you can get started. So I'd like to thank you, Mark, for being my guest today. It went super fast. It was super fun. I learned a lot. And you guys go ahead and check out firstcommand.com.
Thanks for having me, Sandra. It was my pleasure.